It's fabulous to actually have the two of you.
It's amazing.
Having the chinwag.
It's lovely to meet you properly.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I've had the good fortune to spend time living with gorillas in the sense of living in their forests in a little capsule of relative civilization, a corrugated iron shack with a desk and a bed and a chair and a little wood burner stove, but going out each day to spend my days sitting among them, taking notes on their behaviour and more recently filming and photographing them so that I can share that experience, because I think that's what a lot of human behaviour is based on, sharing experiences. You know, how do you convince someone that your point of view is valid? Well, you share the experience that led you to that point of view.
Absolutely.
And when you've spent time with non-human beings in their society, with you have to learn the etiquette, you have to behave in a way that doesn't frighten them, when initially your very form is terrifying, but Diane Fossey had learned how to win the trust of wild gorillas by lowering herself to their level. She was a very tall woman, 6 foot, and so she was very self-conscious about her height. So she'd worked previously as a physiotherapist in the children's hospital, and I think she'd got used to hunkering down and talking to kids
Eye to eye.
Eye to eye, exactly. And gorillas are quadrupedal, they walk on the knuckles of their fore limbs and the flats of their feet. But that means when you're standing up, it's like an angry gorilla. They stand up to show their size and strength. And if you immediately drop down, then you lower the tone of the conversation, the non-verbal conversation. So what that experience gave me was an understanding of the importance of non-verbal communication and of eye contact. The sort of the received wisdom is, oh, you mustn't stare at a gorilla because they'll take it as an aggressive look. And if you walk into a family and stare at people, of course that is a rather disconcerting and rude thing to do. But once you've been sitting there for a while, there's no reason at all why you shouldn't exchange a glance and have it last a little longer. And you get that with gorillas, and I've sat with gorillas actually just gazing eye to eye for quite long periods with mutual curiosity in a completely calm and non-threatening way. So yes, I feel that if everyone had had that experience, their views of not just gorillas but other non-human beings, by beings I mean individuals with self-awareness, with an awareness of how they fit in their society and how that knowledge can help them be better in that society, which I guess in biological terms means having more reproductive success and being a better gorilla or chimpanzee or elephant or whatever the species is. If you've had that experience, how do you share it? And the immediacy of that is, I mean, a one-on-one conversation is great, but then you're only sharing it with one person. If you get on the telly, then you share it with perhaps millions of people, but you're just a voice on a box in the corner. You're not actually interacting immediately with them. And a lot of my recent work has been exploring new ways of reaching people using modern technology. So virtual travel.
Okay.
Most people can't afford to fly to Africa and go and visit a family of gorillas. But if you put on a VR headset, it's like you're there. And although you're only using 2 senses, your eyes and your ears, it's a very immersive experience. And so we've developed a system that allows people to virtually travel to Africa or to Southeast Asia and see apes in the forest, not in exactly how you would if you were there, but giving you a sense of that experience.
It's a way of approaching something other in a very new way.
It is, and because traditional documentary makers are imagining that people will watch their documentary in a box or on an hour flat screen on the other side of a sitting room, and yet that's very much an older generation thing, because most younger people are looking at the palm of their hand on the tube or as they're walking along. Sometimes you see them walking to lampposts because they've got things on their ears and a thing like that, and they're not aware of their immediate surroundings, which is unfortunate, and I don't want to encourage that, but if that's how people gain their information, how can you do that? And even with the traditional television, most documentaries about the kind of issues that the Stop Ecocide campaign is dealing with don't get onto the mainstream television.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if they get onto social
issue.
media, it's a 10-second or 15-second soundbite.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very frustrating. So another new venture is called EcoStreams, with a Z at the end, which is a streaming into whatever device you choose to watch it on. It can be a TV, or it can be a phone in the hand, or it can be a tablet, of documentaries which are made by passionate people trying to change the world, win awards at film festivals, and then disappear.
Right.
And unless you happen to be in the room at the film festival or at some private screening, how do you find these documentaries? Because the mainstream media see really heavy, difficult to absorb, potentially frightening subjects as ratings losers.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they commission natural history films, which are lovely, and just in the last few months they've woken up to the fact that there is a public appetite for films about plastic pollution and about climate change. Hurrah!
Yes,
But,
at last.
some of us have been doing this for a long time.
Absolutely.
And so, and it has to be narrated by Dear Attenborough, who is a wonderful voice for the natural world, but there are many other voices, and sometimes it's more important that that voice is the villager whose fields are about to be inundated by the sea, or whose gardens are about to be razed to the ground for some industrial plantation of some product that the developed world wants. So, yes, I am called sometimes the gorilla man and sometimes the elephant man, because I'm a wildlife biologist and I spent time studying animals in their natural habitat. But the experience I had in both of those instances, first with gorillas and then 10 years later with elephants, that individual animals who I had come to know, and there was a sense of mutual trust, and with the gorillas even friendship, were killed by poachers who had a very different agenda.
Yeah.
But if you could get into the poacher's head, his agenda was very reasonable. I have no money, that bloke down there is going to give me money if I kill a gorilla.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll go and kill a gorilla or an elephant. If someone in the other side of the world wants to buy an ivory knick-knack, and I've got elephants on my doorstep, and there's a guy in town who'll give me more money than I could earn in a year to go out, even though it's extremely dangerous. Killing elephants and gorillas is not for the faint of heart. So you have to admire the courage of someone who, with often very rudimentary tools, will go out and take on a large mammal who will defend his or her family. You're risking your life, and you're doing that because someone somewhere in the world wants a bit of that animal. And so, how do you understand that experience, that agenda?
It's interesting. It actually echoes something, a very poignant question that someone brought up in a talk that I did over the weekend, where she said, she gave the example of Shell's activities in Nigeria. And she said, if this were to become law tomorrow and Shell were to withdraw, and you were to ask the locals whether they wanted that to happen, they may well say no, because actually their livelihood depends on this company. And actually there are going to be communities and countries indeed that are exploited by these various practices across the world for whom that will also be true. Which is also why we feel quite strongly that it's something that people need to see coming, so that there is actually an opportunity for change that can happen, without devastating all these different levels that are involved. Nobody says it's going to be easy, but I have great faith in human ingenuity and enterprise in terms of ways of dealing with that. I hope that might be something that you also encounter.
Well, certainly. I chair the trustees of a charity called the Gorilla Organisation, which grew out of an appeal for help by Diane Fossey back in the 70s. And the Gorilla Organisation had talks with the communities around the national parks where gorillas live, who historically probably felt that they had lost out when that was created as a national park, because they no longer had the right to go into it and do things that their parents and grandparents had been doing for generations. And many of those people had no alternative but to poach. It's what they did, it's part of their culture.
Yeah.
And the guerrilla organisation, encouraged by the Uganda Wildlife Authority, hired an agronomist to teach people living around the park who formerly depended on poaching to grow organic vegetables. One of the aspects of guerrilla tourism is that people flock from around the world to spend their allotted hour sitting 7 metres away from a family of gorillas, hoping that they'll have a David Attenborough moment. Of course, the gorillas are no longer allowed to touch people because they could catch diseases from people. They could catch flu or cold. So an attempt is made. It's explained to the tourists 7 metres is the distance, because it's hard to explain that to the gorillas, and sometimes they come closer. But those tourists need somewhere to stay, and those lodges need food to cook. And so you have this wonderful irony that vegetables grown organically by former poachers are feeding tourists who come to pay a very large amount of money to sit with a family of gorillas. And it works. And in the area where this project has been piloted, the rangers who patrol the forest nearby report that snares have gone down to almost nothing. So one of the risks that the gorillas face, not that the snares are set for gorillas, they're set for antelope, but if a young gorilla gets caught in a snare, it might lose a hand or it might lose its life, unless the gorilla doctors, the vets who monitor the population, can intervene and remove the snare, they're at risk. And my first day in the field in 1976 turned into a poacher day, and we were raiding a poacher camp, and that has been the story of my life. Although I went there to do research, I kept getting diverted to do conservation work, and then the conservation work more or less became the focus. Much as I'm interested in research, producing a lot of papers and books about a species which is heading for extinction is not the desirable outcome. And we know an awful lot about gorillas, but there aren't any.
Yeah.
That's